Hi and welcome to episode 2 of the new mental health paradigm of the 3 levels of mind. If you can remember back to episode 1, if you've seen it, I explained the 3 levels of mind as the intellectual or cognitive level, then the feeling levels in the limbic system, and then most important of all that people don't understand, the mental health industry don't understand, is the level of sensations in the brainstem. That's the most important part of the 3 levels of the new paradigm of the 3 levels of brain working upwards. Now, when we have a new paradigm, there will be new concepts and a new narrative around that. So what I'm going to do today is explain a new concept of a measure of the bottom part of the brain, the bottom 2 levels of the brain, the feelings and the sensations. The intelligence quotient, or IQ, is only really a measure of what the intellectual brain is doing. But if you can see that diagram there, that's only about 10% of the brain's function. The other 90% of the brain's function is down here. And that's what the mental health industry don't understand, because they're not, this is an experiential thing. They're not required to experience their lower brains when in their courses. It's all intellectual learning, but 90% of what we need to know is actually down in the lower parts of our brain. They were the parts of the brain that's old in evolutionary terms, over 300 million years old, this part. And this part up here is only, I think it's only about 200,000 years old when we started to develop our intellectual brain. So, and then we've gone on to develop our intellectual brain, our intellectual abilities, and we think that that's the be all and end all basically. And so the IQ has become the main measure of human functioning. But underneath that is the other 90% of the brain. So what I'm going to do today is introduce you to a measure of the lower level of brain, which will be different from the IQ, and I'm going to call it the global area of love score, because down here is the seat of love. You'll find out when I did primal therapy, I found out that the seat of love is actually down in your brainstem. So I'm going to call it the global area of love score. So here it is here, global area of love. And the global area of love is really a relationship between the love that we have in our, I'll just write it here a bit bigger so you can see it. The relationship we have between love, fear, and primal pain that's imprinted in the lower part of our brain. If we should really have a lot more love imprinted in our brain than fear and primal pain. So, so when we don't, we suffer because of that, because we have all this primal pain and fear floating around. It should be love. So the global area of score will be the relationship between how much love you have and how much primal pain and fear that you have. So I'm going to turn that around, and that's basically the scale of my global area of love. It goes from 0 to 100, and I've got a level of, you see that I've got a level of 50 here, and that's between being severely neurotic and going psychotic. Now I put it at that level because when I had my breakdown, my depressive breakdown, my brain started doing things that I didn't understand. It just like I couldn't control it. It went out of control. I was depressed. I was suicidal. It was just an awful time in my life. So, but anyhow, when I had the breakdown, I started to slip into psychosis. I started hearing voices. So I put that at a level of 50. Between psychosis and neurosis. And then you'll see that I have a level of 80 between the level of love and neurosis, where neurosis starts to set in. Now, the reason that I put it at about 80 was that I've done a lot of primal therapy, and I raised my level from 50 up to 80. I got rid of a lot of the, go back to this one, general primal therapy gets rid of the primal pain and the fear, or it's a slow process, but that's what it aims to do. It gets rid of it, so you raise your score from 50 to 80. Now we have a situation in the human species at the moment where most people will have a GAL score, say somewhere between 50 and 80, or perhaps even higher if they're lucky. But you see, when you get to a level of 60 or 70, you think life may be okay, but you're not aware that life can be a whole lot better at 80 or above. And so that's a point that I want to make. Most people seem to think that where they are is okay. It's as good as it gets, but it's not as good as it gets. If we can increase our GAL score by getting the primal pain out of our system, the primal pain and our fear, we will raise our GAL score. Now, I put it at the level of 80 because I was friendly with a female about my age, and we were just friends for quite a while. She wanted to keep it that way. But one night after dinner, I was leaving, and we had our usual hug, but there's something that overcame me. I had this strong desire, like the whole of my body wanted to hold her and hug her and perhaps even kiss her. But I didn't act out on that because it was such a strange feeling. I hadn't felt that before. Nowhere near it, because when your brain is suppressed with the level of 50, you can't feel those things. You have to wait until you get up here where you actually feel the depth of love and the oxytocin starts to flow. So anyhow, I was a bit confused about what happened, so I just drove around the corner and parked just to get my senses and work out what happened. And I feel that I'd got rid of so much primal pain that I raised my GAL score to 80, where the oxytocin started to flow. And that's what happened. I believe that's what happened that night when I had that feeling, and then that feeling was let the oxytocin go through my body, and that's what I experienced. It was such a wonderful feeling, and I was about 60 odd years old before I ever felt like that, and that's a terrible thing, because I should be feeling that when I'm a 12-month-old baby, not having to wait until I'm 65. But some people don't live their whole lives and don't get to experience the flow of oxytocin. So it's such an important thing. So that explains the 50 and the 80. So ideally it would be good if the whole of the human race had a global area of love score above 80. People can have a low IQ and still have a high global area of love score, but a high IQ will get you into Harvard and perhaps Oxford in the United Kingdom, into those universities. But that doesn't mean much, because those universities only deal in 10% of the brain. It's basically useless. Like you might be able to put a man on the moon, and those sorts of things with that part of your brain, and all this technology we got going now. It's all this part, but it's not bringing happiness and joy and more love and so forth to the human condition, because we don't understand this. This is very important, to have a high IQ for everybody. Doesn't matter. Sorry, I'm going to say it again. It's most important for everybody to have a high GAL score. Having a high IQ is good, but to live a decent human life, you need a very high GAL score. We need to have situations where every child has the opportunity to attain a GAL score between 80 and 100, and then life becomes much more pleasurable to live. Now, this is something that I believe will stand up to scientific scrutiny. There's already some research out there. Vincent Felitti did the adverse childhood experiences research in the late 1990s, and that's what has got the mental health industry going about trauma and adverse childhood experiences. But in my experience, it's just all this trauma and adverse childhood experience is the result of lack of love between people. When we are down here, we can't love the babies, we can't love the children, we can't love our partners because of primal pain. The primal pain keeps it all suppressed. And so we need at least to have a GAL score, a global area of love score of 80 plus. Now, Filletti's research basically fits in with this, where Filletti had the original research had 10 adverse childhood experiences like divorces and domestic violence and people in jail and that sort of stuff. But those things are all just symptoms of a lack of love between humans. But anyhow, the amount of adverse childhood experiences that a person had correlated very strongly with the mental health, with mental disorders, and even they were surprised to find that even people with low GAL scores had higher incidences of physical health as well. But if we look at this chart here, this is where a GAL score's really interesting, because you're going to be a lot healthier if you're between 80 and 100. There's already research out there that shows that warmth and connection is that children grow up better if they have warmth and affection as part of their childhood. So that's, you can only give that warmth and affection if you're in that level of your brain. I couldn't give that to my children because I was down at 50. I did the best I could, but it was not much. So that's why that's another reason why a high GAL score is paramount in a person's life, because the higher you get up here, the healthier you're going to be both mentally and physically. Or if you've got a GAL score down here, well, you're going to be sick mentally, like pressure, fear, depression, fearful, all those sorts of things, and develop all sorts of mental problems. And then that's the basis of all physical problems as well. You'll find that if you drew a line here, say at about 70, you'll find that most of the healthy people would be up there and most of the sick people are going to be down here. So it's very important that we get everybody above 80. That would be the ideal. Now, the measure of a GAL score, it won't be from our intellectual level, like you tick a box of how depressed you are or how unhappy you are, and then they work out a happiness or a wellness score from that. It's going to have to come from this level of the brain. You understand that? We're not going to measure anything much at the intellectual level because that's a bit meaningless because of cognitive biases and other things. We have to measure what comes out of here. Now the physiological measures like heart rate, blood pressure and temperature are things that we can measure, because if you're stressed, you'll have a high heart rate, you'll have your blood pressure will be high, and your body temperature, will be high. Now, when I went through primal therapy, we had our heart rate and our blood pressure and our body temperature taken before and after every session. And over a period of a lot of, let's say 6 or 12 months, your heart rate drops up to 15 or 20 measures, like go from 160 down to 140. I think mine dropped about 10 or 15 on average. And most people's body temperatures actually drop too. The average body temperature is 37. A lot of people end up with body temperatures around 36.5 or 36. You might say, well, why is that? But a body that's under pressure and under stress with primal pain and fear tends to be it's like a car motor, it's over revving all the time. it's got a rev, and so your heart rate, your blood pressure, and your temperature's all a bit higher. And after you do general primal therapy, it drops. So that will be, those measures will help to establish a global area of love score. The other main one that we'll have are biochemical things like telomeres at the end of DNA. It's already shown that if you've got a DNA strand, then you've got telomeres at the end of it. If you have long telomeres, it tells you that you're healthy. If you have short telomeres, it says that you're unhealthy, and you'll probably die earlier than what you should. And that is already part of the research thing. But I want to mention here that a lot of research these days is done at an intellectual level, and then they try and read it at an intellectual level up here. But what the global area of love does is it brings all this area into focus, I guess. So we have a much broader and a much sounder basis in which to fit the research. People are doing this research at intellectual level, then they can't understand a lot of it. But we need to bring this into it, bring this framework into it, instead of that 10% framework, bring the other 90% into it, and then a lot of the research that they're doing now is going to make a lot of sense. It's like the 2-level down narrative from an intellect to emotions doesn't make a lot of sense. But if we bring in the feelings and the sensations in the brainstem, well, everything starts to make sense. That's what I love about what I'm talking about. It brings everything in life into one thing that we can all understand, all into this framework. Another measure we can use is the amount of methylation on our DNA strand. It's already proven by science that children with childhood trauma, or what I call lack of love, have more methylation on their DNA. So that can be added to the measurements to come up with a GAL score for people. And another one is to look at it from a biological point of view, and these things are flowing around our body, that the biological molecules in oxytocin, dopamine, sex hormones, cortisol, and adrenal hormones. If we have a lot of love, or our sensations contain a lot of love, should have a lot of oxytocin and dopamine and flowing around in our bloodstream. Or if we've stressed out, we've got a low GAL score, well, then we're going to have more cortisol and adrenal hormones. Now, the thing to understand about this, and I don't think it's known too well widely in the community, but science is looking into it. It's looking into what happens underneath the biological makeup of a person. And they're looking at vibration, which are the particles, how they vibrate together, the voltages, electricity, how they interact, whether they push themselves apart or bring themselves together, and the lasers. And physicists are actually trying to use these things to make neural networks, or to synthesize neural networks. But this is where we need to look at, and I think this is exciting research, because it's going to prove primal therapy. It's going to prove the efficacy of primal therapy one way or the other, because I believe that when I have a primal feeling, it's this level of my makeup, the smallest particles that we have in the universe, and that's what we're made up from. That's what we evolved out of. You've got to understand that. That's what we evolved out of, are these particles here. And then we get the oxytocin, dopamine, cortisol, and the rest of it. And that's what we don't understand. So this will be an important measure for the GAL score. Physicists are already trying to work with that. So yes, the bottom line is, but that's the top line. So that the bottom line is we're all made up of this vibration, voltages, and lasers, and that's one of the very important things about what I'm talking about. And the nature of love is also involved in this. That's where it originates, because that's how we originated many millions of years ago. We originated out of these things, not these things. They came first. So now I'll go to the uses of a GAL score. I see, when I was studying psychology, I'll just turn this around. When I was studying psychology, they only used the intellectual part of the brain. So, and that was sort of mainly covered by the IQ. They didn't have any measure to measure that. So in any social or humanities research, we need to have a measure of what this is. We need to be able to measure that. So we have things like height and weight and age and gender can all be variables that are mixed in. But if we put in a Gauss score in all of that, we'll get to understand more how this part of the brain affects what's up here. And that's an important thing. It's like this part of the brain, the intellectual part of the brain, has trouble affecting that at all, or changing the way this operates. It's the other way around. The sensations within the brainstem work up that way. So we need a Gauss score for our social sciences research, and then that'll show us that, as I think I've said before, that'll show us that healthy people with a high global area of love score will be more up around here, and people that have a low Gauss score will be down here, and they'll be the sickest mentally and physically. And I think there's already research around that leads to that. It's just that we don't have an overriding paradigm or frame in which to fit it. And this 3 levels of the brain covers that in a fabulous way. Now I want to, while I've got this up here, I'll put that up there again. I want to talk about the dark struggle. Jordan Peterson is a well-known psychologist that talks about life being a dark struggle. Well, if you've got a Gauss score around 50 like I had, life becomes a pretty dark struggle, because you've got to be fighting all your primal pain and all your fear and all those bad imprints that you had early in your life. So it really is a dark struggle. But if you have a Gauss score of 80 and you don't have all that primal pain and fear imprinted in your body, well, life can be beautiful and awesome and all that type of thing. You have better relationships, and life just is not a dark struggle. And Buddhism also says that you've got to overcome the struggle, you've got to overcome the darkness. It's part of life. Well, that goes out the window as far as I'm concerned. You don't need to experience the dark struggle in life. If everybody's looked after as a child and they end up with a high Gauss score, the dark struggle goes out the window. It's life can be pleasurable and awesome, as I've said before. And I can speak with a lot of authority on this, where most people can't, because I've raised my Gauss score from 50 up to about 85, I think now. And so I understand the contrast between what my life was like then and what it is now. It's just so much difference, and it will make a lot of difference to the way humans get on if everybody has a Gauss score between 80 and 100. So a global area of love score, I feel, is very important in understanding the basis of how we are as humans. And I can speak with authority on that, because that's what I've done. It's over 200 sessions to go down through the intellect, the feelings, and then experience this right down here, which is what hardly anybody has done. But people who do Janov primal therapy will all experience it the same. Now, some of this might be a little bit hard to understand, but when you have a new paradigm that brings in new concepts, and the global area of love score is just one of the concepts that I talk about. But I'd like you to stay with it and look at other videos or read my book that I don't have here at the moment. Read my book, The Dysfunctional Brain, One Cause, One Cure, and all those things will there's 5 or 6 videos I'm going to make on various new concepts. So, but it's hard just to understand it in one concept. But hopefully, I'll when I finish this series, it'll all come together. But you'll just need to stay with it because it is a new concept, and you will have to change the way that you see the world. You have to change the narrative that exists in the world at the moment. Change the narrative to a 3 levels up narrative, and that will take some doing, but the human race certainly needs it to happen. Hi, I've come back to add some more to this previous video to try and emphasize the fact that what I'm trying to get across to people is that feelings and sensations are very important in a human life, but we've only ever experienced life from an intellectual viewpoint. We have emotions, and the current mental health industry talks about emotions, but underneath emotions we have feelings, and then underneath feelings we have sensations, but sensations are so far out of context because they're hiding underneath the feelings, so we don't even understand feelings properly, so it's difficult to try and talk about sensations. The knowledge that's available with feelings and sensations is an experiential type knowledge, and that's the knowledge that I got when I did Janov Primal Therapy. I got down into here and I experienced it, but now that I'm trying to tell the general population about it, it's a difficult thing to do because I can only do it through the intellect. I can't transmit that knowledge to people through feelings and sensations. You have to have those experiences yourself, and that's a very important thing to understand. Now, feelings are very important in a human life for several main reasons that I want to tell you about. When we have primal pain, or when we're not loved, we squash everything down. We don't want to feel the pain, but then in doing that, we squash down the ability to have any good feelings, because apparently the pain and the pleasure pathways in the brain are the same. So if you've got pleasure coming up, you're going to get it mixed with the pain. And so we stay away from our pleasure to stay away from our pain, if you understand that concept. It's a very important concept to understand. So if we squash our feelings down, that we've only got a level of 50, that affects 2 very important things in a human life. The first one is empathy. Empathy is a feeling. We have to feel love for our fellow humans and our fellow creatures on this earth. If our good feelings are squashed down, well, then we struggle with empathy. And that's what's a lot of the problem with the world, is that a lot of us don't have empathy because we carry too much primal pain. We need to be up here in the 80 to 100 range so that we have empathy, we care about other people. The other thing that affects a human life is that sex is a feeling as well. Sex is a good feeling, also a sensation, but we'll just stay with feeling at this stage, in that if you squash the feelings down, well, then you can't experience sex in its full pleasure. And so then we have these hundreds of thousands of sex therapists trying to G people up to do things to have an improved sex life. But if you carry primal pain, it's really difficult to have a good sex life, because the primal pain won't let you go to those good places. We go back to here. Here's our loves that feeling, and it's primal pain. If we access our love, we're going to access our primal pain too, and so we stay away from it altogether. We stay right down here in our feelings, when in actual fact, to have a good life, we need to be up here. So they're 2 important things. Empathy and our sex lives depend on really good feeling, and we don't understand that. So that's why GAL score is very important, why everyone needs to have a really good GAL score when they're young, not like me, go looking for it when you're 50 or 60 years old. I'm glad that I did eventually find it, but it should have been, those experiences should have been given to me in the first years of my life, and that's why we need to bring our children up correctly, leave them open to encourage their feelings, so that we all end up with good empathy and good sex lives. Very important.